I am Jeff Oxendine. I'm the founder and president of My Health Career Navigator, also of Health Career Connection, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar on how to write a cover letter and a resume that gets you a job interview, and then actually we're going to spend some time also just talking about interview skills as well. I want to have a welcome to everyone, and particularly the recent Health Career Connection alums that have joined us today. This is a particularly important talk because you all are very talented, and we need you in public health and in healthcare. And the key is, how do you package yourself in a way that really conveys the talents that you have, the passions that you have, and what you bring to employers. And so what we're going to talk about today is some practical tips about how to do that. We'll go through some prepared remarks, and then we'll go ahead and have some time for question and answers at the end. We will be recording this webinar, so if you don't catch everything the first time around, you can watch it, and again, and also that you can share with your friends and colleagues. Olivia Shorter from My Health Career Navigator and HCC is also part of this and may share some of her insights as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's see here. I'm going to turn off my screen. So first of all, we're going to talk about improving your resume. And one thing to talk about is that the purpose of a resume is to get an interview. And that's not often something that we talk about. Often people think about resume, that's really key to getting the job, and it is key to getting the job because getting the interview is important to getting the job. But think of the purpose of your resume as to get an interview, and then once you get the interview, that's where you have the ability to sell yourself and show the fit that you have for the job. One thing to think about is that while you all have impressive experiences, or maybe not as much experience as you'd like to have, but you need to showcase what you've got. The average person is only going to spend 10 to 30 seconds in reading a resume, and this person may or may not be the hiring manager. It might be the recruiter or somebody whose role it is to screen resumes. And so you need to have something that's very concise, that really, somebody who's reading quickly, that the key things that you want to get across jump out to them, that they don't have to work that hard to see. And so your goal really is to present yourself in a concise and compelling way. And a key thing is really be aligned with what they're looking for. I know it's tempting to have just a general resume, and you do want to have a really good resume that you can use for all purposes, and to have a cover letter that helps customize for particular roles. But you want to make the case between your resume and the cover letter about how what you have to offer really fits with what they're looking for. And you really want to make sure that the most important themes jump out, easy for them to read and see what's most important, and see things that are going to be compelling to them, like perhaps the name of the school that you go to, or the organization that you worked with, or an HCC that you did your internship with, or the job title that you had, or the cool responsibility that you worked on, like you worked on lean management or something. Have those things jump out. You want to have a structure that is appropriate. You want to think of this as easy for someone who's reading quickly to read. You want to make it that there should be spacing so that they cannot have to read too dense paragraphs. That's not easy for me to do, but have good spacing, have easy to read font and colors. Some people want to really go for style and think that they're going to stand out by having a certain by being unique in terms of the color and the font color. I've seen resumes that have red font, for example, and sort of fancy cursive-looking font and those kind of things. I think better to be more conservative and to have it be easy to read, and have your resume and cover letter content help make the case for you, rather than the font and the colors that you have. And then you also need to have a professional email address. to go along with your, to be on your resume, not the one that you use for your friends. And same with having a good LinkedIn account and a good LinkedIn address and Facebook. People are increasingly looking at not only your resume, but looking at your LinkedIn and your Facebook. And any place that you're putting yourself online, you want to make sure that you're coming across in a professional way. So those are some initial tips. Next slide, please. A big thing, and this is a hard one, is that it really should just be a one-page resume. Part of people reading it in 10 to 30 seconds is they don't want to have time, they don't want to have to turn the page. And particularly if you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience, maybe you have a lot of volunteering and awards and clubs that you participated in and community activities, church activities. It's really great if you have a lot of different kinds of things. Maybe you have you were the valedictorian in high school or something like that, where you studied abroad. I mean, those are all good. You have to really prioritize to say, at this stage of my development, I am now, you have to decide, I'm a college student or a college graduate or a graduate student, or I've been out for X number of years. What is most relevant, and what's most relevant for my stage as well as for the type of job that I'm applying for and the specific job that I'm applying for. What's really relevant? And maybe ask yourself, so what? And put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter who is reviewing your resume, and when you have something on there for the specific job that you're applying for, maybe say, so what? Does this say, what's that person going to really think about it relative to the job you're applying for? Or I once was part of a session of strategic planning where people were saying on the mission statement, if you had to pay $1,000 for every word that you were adding to the mission statement, would you add that extra word? So whatever ways that you can, prioritize so that you can really fit it in one page and so that it's a readable one page. Those of you that have a lot of experience, you may really have a harder struggle with this. And in that case, I really do still think better to have one page. If you have 10, 15, 20 years of experience, maybe having 2 pages would be reasonable. But you should prioritize for what the kind of path that you're going towards, the kind of jobs that you're applying for, and make sure that those most important things are the things that jump out and are easy for people to get to. If you don't have a lot of experience, you're saying, oh my gosh, how do I fill a page? And that's where I want you really to think about not only your work experience, and it may be really relevant, natural given where you are in terms of your cycle of development, that you don't have as much experience. But make sure this is where you're thinking creatively about your volunteer experience, your student club experience, your community experience, anything in which you have taken initiative, taken a leadership role, had responsibility, managed an event, managed a project, educated someone. I mean, think of the kind of things that you want to do, or worked with technology in some way. So think of things that help tell your story. A resume and cover letter are telling a story, and for wherever you are, you're where you're supposed to be. Just think about what things are going to tell your story the best. And they don't always have to be paid experiences. One thing that always comes up is, what about an objective? And particularly when you're trying to fit it on one page, an objective takes up a fair amount of space to write, as well as the space around it. There's different opinions that people have. Writing a resume is in a lot of ways an art. I am not a big fan of objectives unless they're really, really specific to the job that you're applying for. An objective that just says, I'm seeking a position with increasingly progressive responsibilities that will challenge me and that will satisfy me, that doesn't help anything. And it just wastes space, and it makes something general at the top of your page, and it looks like you didn't really target something for a specific job. So, but however, on the other hand, if you're applying for a quality improvement analyst role, and quality improvement is what you're all about, and you have did your internship in that area, and you really know that you want to become a quality improvement analyst working in a hospital setting or something like that, and that's the job that you're applying for, then then perhaps if that adds some value, you can do that. But remember, you have your cover letter to state really clearly about why you're interested in that particular job, and so think about using the cover letter for that purpose. So there are people who really value objectives. I'm not a big fan of it, and so you really just have to think: how is this really helping me? What value is it adding? And ask the so what question again. And again, if you need to fit it in one page, then maybe not putting the objective might help you get more things on there. I think one really important thing to do is when you're looking at your responsibilities, not just to list the responsibilities that you have, which most people do, like, well, I organized an health fair. I shadowed a physician. I contributed to a grant proposal or something like that. Those are all good things to include. But one thing when you're writing your entry related to your work experience, that I would instead think of the formula that is either PAR, which is located here, or. PAR is what problem did you address, what action did you take, and what were the results that you achieved, or what was the objective that you were addressing, what action do you take, and what the results were. People want to know, people are increasingly looking for others who can generate results and who take action. They also want to know what uniquely did you do, not did a team do or something like that. And they like to see that it was related to a problem or objective. And so the bullet points that you organize under the topic of your job and your title that you had, or under a paragraph that you can have, and again, think of which is more readable, bullets or paragraph, should have this sort of PAR or method in mind. And so better would be to say, to address healthy eating issues for the community, in the underserved community that I worked with. We wrote a grant. I wrote the evaluation of a grant to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that was submitted during my internship, and the grant got funded. Or I was the leader in organizing a health fair that had 50 participants from a wide range of from all different organizations, and served over 300 people. The satisfaction with the career fair was rated at 90%, rated it as getting them information which improved their ability to take care of their health. Some way to really show what you tried to accomplish, what the action was, what the results were. If you did something that saved money, say how much money you saved, or raised money, or made something accessible for people. But think about it in that method. And then also in your interview, you want to think about the results and the actions that you took. You want to prepare those things when you're talking in your interview. Make your resume sequential in terms of the reverse chronological order would be my suggestion. I think if you are somebody who has some reasonable post-undergraduate experience, then you might list your experience first, or you might list or if you don't have a lot of experience and the education is the thing you got going the most for you, definitely include your education first, followed by your experience, and put the most recent education that you have first, and then sort of work backwards chronologically, and the most advanced education that you have, and work back chronologically. You can put your GPA, if their GPA is something that is or major, if those are things that are strong, you can include them in your resume. If it's above a 3.0 GPA, you might want to include that. But your experience should be working backwards chronologically. You should list the paid experience separately from the volunteer experience. I've seen a lot of students who want to mix the two, and that's, it'd probably be better to separate paid and then have unpaid below. But if you are going to weave them together as chronologically as part of your story, then just make clear that if something is unpaid or volunteer, highlight that as something that's different than you don't have to say about that about the paid experience. You just have to highlight something that's unpaid or volunteer. If you don't have a lot of experience, I think what you want to do is, or as much relevant experience, it's okay. Put forward what you have, but just really think about, as I mentioned earlier, beyond any kind of paid experience that you have, what are the other kinds of experiences that you have that might be relevant? Internships or volunteering or community experience, something like that. We have many students that have retail experience because they worked in retail as they were going to school, or they're still working in retail. That's good to show because it shows that you had a job, that you were responsible, that you were successful. It might show customer service skills. It might show, people skills. It might there may be a lot of different things that you can, maybe managerial or organizing skills, things that you can really talk about. But then you want to also have on there things that you did that are related to health if you're applying to a health job, and specifically, if you can, the kind of job that you have, or relevant skills or coursework or something like that too. Please, those of you that are HCC alums, please put your HCC experience on your internship. I can't tell you how, and on your LinkedIn profile, and on Facebook profile, other kinds of things, because I see time and time again, I saw one yesterday, an alum who just listed the organization that she was in and didn't, which is more important to list the organization that you worked with and the role that you have, but list your HCC experience too, because increasingly employers, health professions, schools, community-based organizations, they work with HCC alums, and they might be HCC alums themselves that would look for that, and that would give you an advantage. And so we want you to have the HCC brand that would help you. It also helps HCC as far as being able to see that we have talented students like you that are applying for roles. So put your organization, your title first, but make sure then you have a bullet point that says part of the Health Career Connection, select national internship program or something like that. So do include HCC on there. Make sure that there are some resumes that look really good that have a section for relevant skills or strengths. It's okay to have that. Some people put that at the top of their resume, maybe after their education or after their most recent experiences, and put it like a summary of skills, and put the kind of skills that that job is interested in, and typically things like good Excel and computer skills and project management or health education, but put the kind of skills that you think are relevant to that job, or that you have that you think you can bring to that particular job. And then if it's not in a skills summary itself, which is fine, you can put it sometime at the bottom, put major skills that you have. And those of you that have good social media, technology skill, you all are natives in that area. Make sure that some of those skills are identified, but I don't know that you need to list Microsoft Word and all that. Specifically put unique things that you know how to do. For sure put Excel or Access if you know how to do those kinds of things. It's also good if you have room to put some of your interests down, because interests make you relatable to people, and they make you human. You don't know how many people are going to go, oh gosh, I play lacrosse too, or I play basketball too, or gee, I was in the Peace Corps, or I sing in the church choir, or some things like that, or I like to travel. When you're in an interview, somebody might go, when they're reading your resume, they go, I'd like to meet this person. In an interview, that gives them something to ask you about. But that should be sort of one line, several different things on that particular line. It shouldn't be the thing that dominates your resume. So next slide, please. So that's about resumes, and we can answer your specific questions in another 10-15 minutes or so when we get to that point. I'm now going to talk about cover letters, and it's really the combination of a resume and cover letter that you can that will represent you. And one thing that you want to do for sure on both resumes and cover letters is double check for grammatical, spelling, and errors. It's really important. There are a lot of people who are very detail-oriented and meticulous, and if they see any kind of even a spacing issue or a spelling issue or any grammar issue, that may disqualify you right off the bat. And so you want to make sure on your cover letters, especially in the cut and paste days, make sure you've got the right names and the right grammar and the right spelling. Have someone review your cover letters for you so that you have the ability to have someone who is good at grammar take a look, and also see if what you write really reflects who you are and what you want to have come across, because that might be the first thing that people read about you even before they look at your resume. A cover letter also needs to be concise and compelling. I think no longer than a page. Probably better to be maybe 3/4 of a page, half a page, but don't have it be too short. I've seen lots of cover letters that are a paragraph, and they're about 3 or 4 lines, and that's it. And I think you need a little bit more than that. You need to not just say, hey, my name is Jeff, and I'm applying. I saw your ad, and I'm applying for this particular job. Please consider, attaches my resume. I look forward to hearing from you. That's not what you want to have. In your cover letter, you need to really state your intention, start with a strong topic sentence that makes it clear, why you are applying for this specific job. And then you make the case, and it's good to have some kind of a structure that you're following to organize your argument, to organize your case, maybe a better thing, to organize your case and organize your story in a way that it flows and things are tightly integrated with each other. And one formula that I think about is just, very briefly, what are you currently doing? It could be something like, I'm a recent graduate from UC Berkeley. I was a public health major. Actually, it has to be after your topic sentence. Your strong topic sentence should be, I'm writing to enthusiastically apply for your position of project manager of the worksite wellness program, and I think my skills and qualifications make me a strong candidate. And then that's when you would come in and show, here's what I'm currently doing. I recently graduated from UC Berkeley with a public health major. I just completed my Health Career Connection internship, and I'm now, in my internship I worked on these things, and I'm now applying for this wellness manager role. Then next should be my interest. This role fits perfectly with my interests and qualifications. I want to do X, kind of a work that really aligns with that position. And, I know in the position that you're looking, I have the kind of project management and team and leadership skills that you're looking for. But again, make it specific to that particular position. That's the main thing, is that you're not just writing a whole generic cover letter. The resume may end up being more generic, but the cover letter really needs to be aligned to the position. So you need to really read closely, and I mean really read closely, what it is that the position is looking for, and to make sure that you are clear about what qualifications in terms of experience, in terms of credentials, and in terms of the skills and competence that they're looking for and their needs. So you want to be able to be really clear and really understand that fully, and maybe even talk to people if you can, to make sure you understand it and listen carefully, and then write the letter that's going to show how you fit with that position just right. And in the end, you want to have a good strong opening sentence. You want to also have a good strong closing sentence that kind of summarizes what you put in the body of the work. Kind of in closing, because of my skills and experience in X, Y, Z, this really shows that I should be, they're a good fit with what you're looking for, and I look forward to hearing from you about next steps, or something like that. So that, that's the key, is really spend time on this, and really make sure that the story comes across that makes the case for you as a good fit for that job. Next slide, please. So, and as I mentioned, you want to think of the resume and cover letter as a package. They're both telling the story to get you an interview. What you don't want to do in your cover letter is just have a narrative of your resume, or as I said earlier, that you don't just want to say, attached is my resume, please read my qualifications. You want to make the story that shows that you're qualified. Really look at it as a good opportunity to expand on the most relevant skills, or make the case. Maybe I've got students who have mainly research experience, for example, but they have a lot of it. They were researchers on projects, they were research managers, but it was mainly research experience, and then they have to, then in the cover, and so their resume, they're a little bit nervous when they're applying for more of a management role or a health education kind of role that's more practical oriented, and they're nervous. Well, gosh, I'm more of a researcher. My experience is all research. Well, in the cover letter is where you make the case. You say, well, I'm applying to this job. I am transitioning from being a clinical trial coordinator, for the last few years, and I'm doing that because I've now decided that, my direction is to work in quality management in a hospital, and based on my experience, I was a clinical trials manager in a hospital setting, an academic medical center setting. So I have interacted with physicians and other people in a hospital setting, and I'm bringing my skills, my analytical skills, my team skills, my project management skills, my promoting to patients skills and working with diverse patients. Think about the things you can translate from that opportunity to show that you can apply it to the position that you're looking for. And make sure that you're speaking directly to what they're looking for. And then give some concrete examples of if there's really some selling point that you can give, not in a lot of detail, but something that's really specific, and you can give a good example of how you've done something that they're looking for. For example, I recently applied to be a board member of an organization, and as part of that application, I gave some examples of other boards that I had been on and roles that I'd had, and some of the things that were relevant from that experience for that particular job. Next slide, please. So once you do a great job with your resume and cover letter, then and again with your LinkedIn profile, a professional picture, a professional presentation of yourself, and having your LinkedIn profile also be aligned with what you have in your resume as far as the story that you tell. You don't want to have major discrepancies. And once you do that, then you're going to get the interview. And in terms of getting the interview, you want to come in with the confidence that in your interview that you're going to be the one that they want to hire. And a key to interviewing is preparation. It's really doing your homework ahead of time on the organization. And it's sort of obvious, and you want to make sure that you know all the things that are on the website and beyond, but also the interviewer that you're going to be speaking with, and asking if sometimes you just show up and you don't know whether it's one person or a panel of interviewers. I'm sure many of you, I've had that experience. You show up and you think, oh, I'm going to be talking with one person, and there's 5 people sitting across the table from you, and you're the only one on your side, and you want to ahead of time find out, what is the format of the interview going to be. And are there going to be some interviews are case study interviews? You definitely want to know that ahead of time. There's a certain technique to case study interviews, and we have resources we can share on that if people are, particularly for consulting or for fellowships now in health, they have those kind of questions. But know what the format's going to be, how long you're going to be there, whether there's going to be lunch served or not if you're coming in the middle of the day. Just really understand what the situation is that you're going into so that you can really be prepared, right? And then make sure that you really do your homework on the mission and values, the priorities of the organization, any current major projects that they have. Make sure those things align with you and be prepared to talk about how you're in alignment with that organization's mission and values and priorities. And again, going back to thinking about if you can't even find out who the interviewer is going to be, then you can do some homework on them. And that might be really helpful for you in connecting with them and communicating your value and relating to them in a positive way. So after you know the organization and what you're getting into, then it's important to work on that important part of knowing yourself and getting down to what do I really want to get across in this interview for the job that I'm going for? What are the key points I want to make about my strengths, about my ability to learn, about my ability to connect with people and navigate organizations. Those are things I'm hearing more and more about lately is can people come into organizations? Can they navigate the organization culture? Can they be self-starters, take initiative, work with direction but also independently? Can they deal with ambiguity and change? Are they flexible and adaptable? These are all things that you want to think about for yourself, and for each thing you want to be able to have an example of something that from your work or your project experience, your community experience, school experience that helps demonstrate what you're saying about yourself. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But one really important thing is you should really be able to answer, why are you applying for the job? And have that be an answer that that is genuine, and also that you think if you were the hiring person that you would find someone that they want to work with. For example, I once had a person who was the top candidate from our resume and cover letter reviews. She came in and we had a panel interview with her, and so the first thing we asked her is, so tell us, why are you interested in this job? And her answer was, well, because it will improve my commute. And she said, I'm being honest with you, this will improve my commute. And she didn't say anything at all about the organization that we had and the mission and our values and the programs and priorities. And so for her, and I guess, yeah, I got to credit her for being honest, but right there she lost the job. She wasn't really considered by any of us after that answer. And so have a good answer and have it be specific to the job and have it be the beginning of your story about why you're taking the job. And so I can't emphasize it's important to have a good answer for that. Next slide, please. One thing that sometimes I find with people earlier in their career, or people with different personalities or from different cultural backgrounds, is we're not necessarily comfortable talking about ourselves. I'm somebody who's much better at asking questions of people, of other people, and learning more about them and listening about them than I am about talking about myself in situations. And particularly tooting my own horn is not something that I'm that comfortable with doing. But guess what? In an interview, you have the permission, not only the permission, you have the requirement to be able to do that, because this is your opportunity to make the case on behalf of yourself and advocate on behalf of yourself. And so one thing to do is to practice. Interviewing is an important thing to practice. Practice with people that you know or people that you don't know ahead of time, and talk about yourself and make strong points about yourself and highlight your strengths, and don't be shy. You don't want to come across as an arrogant person, which I'm guessing most of you would not, but you want to come across as a confident, self-assured person who has something to offer and belongs there and can do the job. One way to help in interviews is to get there plenty of time in advance. Find the room, collect yourself, relax. Get some water, do whatever you do to help relax. If you read, if you breathe, if you do a cover letter, if you meditate, if you think about things that are helpful to you to relax. The last thing you want to do is be rushing and not find a place. More and more these days, it's harder to find parking. ID checks before you go in buildings that you didn't know that you had to do. There's special people who have to let you in elevators to get up there. They have to buzz you in, and somebody got to come grab you. So give yourself plenty of time to be able to get there. Make sure that you're your best and your best self. And maybe even, what I do is I'm better as somebody who, I'm an exerciser, so I make sure that before I have an interview that I get my exercise in, and that I'm prepared for the interview, but also that I've gotten my exercise in, that I've meditated, that, I had a good, make sure that you eat. I've had a lot of people who have problems when they don't eat for interviews. Make sure that you've had something to eat, maybe not too much so that you're going to go to sleep, but anyway, take care of yourself as part of the process. Make sure that you think of the organization that you're going to and what their dress code is. It used to be that you were safe dressing up in a coat and tie or a suit and tie or for a certain kind of dress or a suit for women. Now you kind of have to think about, am I going into a startup? Am I going into a public health organization? Am I going into a place that's business casual? So you do want to look like you are professional and nice for the interview, but you want to think ahead of time, make sure that you're appropriate for the environment. On the other hand, you also have to make sure that if you're a more formal student, sometimes students and sometimes people who work in the community, they're not used to dressing up. And maybe you're going into a situation in a health system, for example, or a consulting or a firm or a health plan where you do have to dress more formally. So know what you're getting into. And then it's really important to make a connection and focus on your interview. And again, sometimes this is hard depending on your culture, depending on your personality, your upbringing. But think of the culture that you're going into, and make sure that that you make, as appropriate, you make eye contact. If you can have a firm handshake, if you can. That might not be what your culture does, but realize if it's in this culture that you do want to do that. And be present. Really focus your attention on the other person. Sometimes that helps take some of the pressure off you also in terms of your self-consciousness. And really make a connection with the person through eyes, through body language, through just being there and having good energy. Even if you're nervous, a lot of you will be nervous, but you have really good energy and it will still come across. And realize that if you're nervous, that's natural. Think of it as energy, actually, instead of nervous. And then oftentimes once you get in, it's worse once you're waiting, but once you get in there, that you will be, you'll do a good job. And once you start talking and yourself will start coming through, that it will be fine. You'll be more relaxed. And good interviewers will put you at ease. They might ask you a question about yourself first, and about the day, or about your school, or something like that, or a personal question. And feel free to connect with them about that. If somebody's giving you a stress interview, then just be yourself, answer the questions directly. Don't take it personally, and don't be your own hardest critic. I think one of the biggest downsides to interviewing for a lot of people is we are so critical of ourselves that when we give an answer, we're like, oh no, I should have said this instead, or oh, I blew the answer to that question, or I'm coming across as nervous, or I'm not being as articulate as I should be, or the more that you get caught up in your critic about yourself and focusing and listening to that critical voice, sometimes you're not going to do as well. And so I'd say focus on being present with the other person, connecting with them, and coming across the best that you can. And if you miss something, then don't worry about it. Maybe you'll have a chance later to come back and say, gosh, on that question you asked me, I realized I didn't say X, Y, and Z. Or I recently, for that board example I gave you, I went back and I wrote a thank you note afterwards, and I included some of the points that I didn't make in the interview that I wanted to make afterwards. But don't be so hard on yourself. You are going to be harder on yourself most of the time than the other people will. They want to see who you are. They want to get to know you. They want to, and they are looking to see who you really are, not just who you are, the image that you're portraying. So you do want to be professional, but it's okay to let yourself come through. Next slide. So, sorry. Now you need to be ready with some questions. Both you need to have your own questions, which I would say many people don't do that, and because you focus on what you're going to say, it's important to be prepared and have them written down and have it in a folder. And when they ask you, do you have any questions, either you verbally say them or you open your folder and you have your questions written down, that shows preparation, that shows organization, that shows thoughtfulness and initiative. So make sure you have some questions and not things that you can answer on the web, that can be answered by the website. Have them be thoughtful kind of questions about the job. But more importantly, be ready for their questions. And they're going to ask you some common things, as I mentioned earlier. So why are you interested in this job, and how does it fit into your career plans or your educational plans, something like that. And tell me about your career direction, and where do you see yourself in 5 years? And one thing that I think is important there, a lot of people I meet want to be flexible and open. I'm passionate about public health, and I'm really not sure what I want to do yet, but I'm open to any kind of possibilities within public health. And I think a lot of people feel that comes across as being open, and that way people can work with you in any way, but actually makes it harder for people. And so I think what you want to do is think about the job that you're interested in and why that job fits into your career path, and tell them a career path. And doesn't have to be only one. You might say, well, I'm really considering 2 paths in public health now, or public health and medicine, and I'm applying to this job because it's aligned with my public health interests, and because I really want the deeper exposure and experience, because I'm really passionate about what you all do. I want to build the skills that you have, and I want to contribute, and I think it'll help me figure out my career direction. So you can be specific if you can, and have it be aligned with the job. You need to be prepared to talk about your strengths, particularly your strengths for that particular job. You can take the Strengths Finder assessment, take feedback from your preceptors from previous internships or previous employers. Think about what are your strengths, and particularly your strengths relevant to that job. But you also have to be clear about speaking about at least one of your weaknesses. I think they're going to ask a very common question is, so what are areas that you need to improve in? Or what do you consider to be some of your weaknesses? And have something that answers the question, that's honest, but don't dwell on it and don't have a long list of them, and talk about maybe how it has been a weakness, but you're working on strengthening it, and give some examples of how you're doing that, and how you think that you'll do in this particular role. And then make sure that you highlight specific accomplishments or successes that you have. They might ask you that. And there's something called behavioral interviewing, which now organizations have a list of behaviors and competencies for each position. And when you are interviewing for the position, oftentimes the person or the panel, they actually even have to have a checklist to see, and they rate you as far as that particular competency. So it might be something like able to work in teams, able to use Excel, able to give effective oral presentations. It could be a lot of different, it takes initiative. And so for each one of those things, you want to think ahead of time by reading the job description, what are they looking for? And then before you go to the interview, come up with examples to say, well, I think they're going to ask me about my analytical skills. And so you should be able, and my Excel skills. So you should say, yes, I'm proficient at using Excel, and I used Excel in my internship where I did a budget for the new dental clinic that we're looking at, and I've also used it in my classes where we did analysis of data, and then we presented graphs and charts and those kinds of things. And I can do pivot tables. In Excel I did it for X, Y, and Z. Or here's an example of when I've worked on a team, and here's my role in the team. Here's what happened. Be prepared for people to ask you about bad team experiences or bad project experiences, how you dealt with them. So you want to have an example for all the kind of things that you think you're going to be asked about that highlights your strengths and demonstrates the strengths that you're putting across. So next slide. So speaking of questions, now it's time for your questions. And we have about 15 minutes for questions. Hopefully this was a good overview and some of the basics. Now let's hear what you all want to, and I know we had some questions sent in advance. I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Olivia Shorter, who's going to maybe add some things to what I said and ask the questions.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you to everyone who joined the webinar this afternoon. Really just echoing some of the comments Jeff already made, I would just like to emphasize that the resume, the cover letter, and the interviewing is really an opportunity for you to highlight and to share your best self. And all of these tips and strategies that we're giving are really ways for you to feel more confident and more self-assured going forward. With that said, as a program manager for HCC and someone who's also gone through the program herself and gone through various types of interviews and application processes, I would just say that each sort of opportunity you're pursuing is going to be a little bit different, and you do have various strengths and skill sets that are probably more relevant and specific than others. So even if you're, a college student and you feel like you don't have a ton of work experience yet, or maybe you're applying for a health education position and like Jeff said, you've done mostly research, what I would say is really critically and honestly reflect on the experience you do have, even if it's not traditional formal public health experience. Think back on the class projects you were involved in. Think back on your volunteer experience. If you're part of any collaboratives or committees in school or outside of school, and really see how do those, what skills and what projects did you participate in, and how do those skills transfer to this new position. Something we always say in HCC is all skill is transferable, and really your job is to explain and to illustrate how those skills can relate and apply to perhaps a completely different position. So sort of an overarching theme, we got quite a few questions, and we've spent quite a bit of time talking today about what to do if you maybe aren't as confident in your depth or breadth of experience so far. And something else that I just wanted to add from an HCC perspective is that students often will come into interviews and didn't have a lot of questions for us. And there are obviously students who did, but just kind of know that it's not just an opportunity for you to highlight, your best self, but it's also a really rare opportunity you get to learn completely new information about an organization that you can't get from the website. So while asking those questions might be scary, one, it does say a lot to your interviewer that you're interested, that you've done your homework, and that you are really, passionate about the organization enough to do that research. But also, if you've done all of the hard work in your resume and your cover letter to get that interview, take that time as an opportunity to really make a connection with the person you're meeting with, and to learn something that you would have not had the opportunity to have learned just purely from doing, LinkedIn and website research. So think of it as an opportunity as opposed to just, something you might be stressing out over or being anxious about. So those are a couple of the tips that I wanted to highlight. And I know we did receive quite a few questions in advance during registration. And also I've seen we have a couple questions come in. So if you haven't had a chance to send us any questions, please do so now using the chat box. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and start with some of the questions that were already sent in. So Jeff, maybe we can start with some resume questions. And the first, which I think is great, is, are there any red flags that students or our candidates should be avoiding on their resume? Are there any things that really jump out at you in a negative way when you are reading resumes?
So the first is what I mentioned about having no spelling or spacing errors. I had many people that I interviewed with HCC this year that I loved them, but they had spacing errors and typos and things like that. That's a big red flag, and I think putting down your experience in a way that seems like it was perhaps much longer than it was. So I've had students that put down that they just did an internship for 2 months, but yet they put down, I did this for, they don't put the months, they just put like the years or something from December, or they put down, 1990, I'm old, 2012 to 2013, when it was really, December 2012 to February 2013. So just make it accurate, about what you did, because people are going to do their homework on that. I think putting stuff from your high school, if you are somebody who's in college, isn't a great. Maybe if you're a freshman in college, that's okay. but once you get past your freshman year, you don't want to necessarily put your high school stuff on there any further. And then making it too long, being somebody who basically is in college or is 1 or 2, 3 years out of college and having it be a 2-page or 3-page resume, I wouldn't support. So those are some of the things, and it's just making it hard to read the experiences that you had would be good.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And another resume question. Really, it's about tailoring your resume. And this person asks, various organizations look for emphasis on different things, and we might be applying for different types of positions. So is it better to have different resumes, or should you be tailoring your resume for these different applications?
That's a great question that comes up all the time, and I think you want to have a really good standard resume that you use and that you can send out quickly. And if it's there are common types of positions that you're applying for and common types of organizations, that might be great. You may want to have, if there's really a position that you think you want to customize your resume for, because you can really make highlight some of your experiences in a different way that really do fit with that role. Or if you're really applying to different kinds of positions, maybe one's more of a research, one's more of a practical kind of a role, for example, then you may want to have separate ones that you can utilize, or certain things that you switch in and out. Just be sure that you're when you do that you've got the right version that you're sending, and that there's no typos and the wrong names and things in there. So I think that's also just depends on you and your ability to crank things out and to customize or not. One thing I forgot to say that I want to address is, when you're trying to fit on one page, you don't need to put references available upon request at the bottom of your resume. People know that that's the case, and you don't need, unless they specifically ask in the job announcement, you don't have to list references either on your resume. You might have and even if they do, you might have a separate page for that that you attach to your resume. So anyway, that was just another tip I forgot to mention.
Our next question is about how to talk about specific experience, specifically studying abroad, working abroad. How is the best way to talk about that, in the resume or in the cover letter?
Well, I would put it on the resume as far as, if you studied abroad, for example, and you have your education listed, I would definitely list that in your under education. And perhaps if you did some kind of project work or community work, or if you were in a special program of some kind when you were studying abroad or working abroad or something, either you put that under your experience, or particularly if it was a paid one, or under your volunteer experience or your professional activities. I think it's good to have studying abroad in there, because a lot of people have done that themselves, and that gives you something to relate to. It makes you an interesting person also. Oh, I have a student who's in Paris right now, and reading her resume, oh wow, she's in Paris, that's cool. And it also shows that you're somebody who has maybe gone out of their comfort zone a little bit, experience another culture, experience another country in some way. So I think that's good. I think longer is stronger, probably, that you went to a country for 3 months or 6 months or something like that versus a 1-weeker. So the ones that are longer, I would make sure that are on there. But even a 1 week, if you went on a medical mission or something like that, then that's something you can talk about. Just don't make it more than what you really did. But yeah, I think it's important to put abroad. A lot of people relate to that. A lot of people have done that themselves, and they'll be interested and impressed by that. If you did something like Peace Corps, definitely make sure that comes across. There's a lot of really passionate Peace Corps alums that are out there that are looking for other Peace Corps alums that they can connect with and they can hire. And so yeah. But just put and list the things that make it interesting, but also relevant for that particular job. And if you're applying for international kind of health positions, then make sure that you have a lot of that on there, and you talk about what you are taking from those experiences to help make you a good global health person. And if you've got mainly international and now you're going domestic, the same thing in your cover letter or in your skills summary, you highlight the things that you can make the case from having worked internationally about why you can be effective domestically.
Thank you, Jeff. And we have one more really content-focused question, and then we'll shift into questions about interviewing, which we've received quite a few about. This last question is it appropriate to talk about adversity or challenges overcome in either the resume or the cover letter if it relates specifically to this person's interest in pursuing a career in public health?
So the answer is yes, in a concise, compelling, appropriate way for the nature of the job. I think for a job, you need to look at the nature of the job. If it's a job working in just making this up, working in a health system or a health plan that's really about analyzing data, about quality improvement, and it doesn't have anything to do with communities, it doesn't have anything to do if it doesn't have anything to do with your story, then I think you do need to think about what will this add for me talking about this aspect of my background, in addition to talking about the skills and the strengths that I bring. But maybe it is part of the strength and the skills and experience that you bring. But make sure it's relevant and that the people are going to be interested in the organization. I think it's probably most appropriate in the cover letter to talk more about it and make it aligned with the job that you're applying for, rather than spending a lot of time with it in your resume if it's challenges or adversity that you've overcome, other than you were in a special program for students from a certain background and and that what you did in that program. But maybe in your cover letter, it's a better place to write about in a concise, compelling way, how that experience and how what you've overcome and the resilience that you have and the strengths that you have, how that is helping you be a good fit for the job you're applying for, how it's part of your qualifications and story.
Shifting a little bit into interviewing, we have a question about feeling like questions were not asked that allowed this person to really highlight the skills they wanted to. So what happens if you get in an interview and you feel like it's not natural to respond in their questions in a way that really gets to bring up those key points that you want to come across in an interview? So what is maybe a strategic way to highlight the things you want to highlight without getting off track?
Good question. I think that what you want to do is if you haven't gotten to highlight some of your key strengths, if they haven't asked it, then look for moments to, if it's appropriate with the flow of the interview, and you have to kind of read the interview and how it's going, to insert some of those things. And if it's not as part of the flow of the interview, sometimes people pause, sometimes people are thinking about what the next question is. There's moments of opportunity where you might be able to say, oh, by the way, I didn't have a chance to share this part of my background with you that I think might be relevant. Here's an example. But if you don't get to do it in the body of the interview and when you're talking about a certain topic, you definitely want to maybe at the end, if they ask you, well, do you have any questions, or would you like to make any comments, you might say, well, gee, I realize that, in answering the great questions that we've talked about, I haven't had a chance to point out these things about my background or bring up these skills that I have that I think are really relevant to this position. And so, worst case, use the opportunity at the end to talk about that.
As a follow-up and continuing with interviewing advice, do you have any really great questions that the candidates can ask of the interviewing at the end that you think would really help them stand out?
Well, I think the standing out is you want to make the case before the questions about why you stand out and why you're a good fit for the role. But I like the question that you just asked. That would be an example of a good question that you can ask. I think it would be something. Sometimes you can ask people about their own journey and to the job, depending on if it's a hiring manager, if it's a recruiter, that's not what you want to ask, right? They're there just to recruit you, and but you see who the person is, and by the nature of how they are, how personable they are, how open they are, ask a question about their own journey there, or about their what they like most about working in the organization, or what some of their most significant priorities are. What are they really looking for? What are the key things that they're going to use in terms of selection for this position? Things like that show an interest in them, show an interest in the organization, its priorities, and an interest in the job. And what are the keys to success for someone coming into this role? What would be the keys to success, or what would be some of the first things that I would do if I were to be in this kind of job? And think of things like that. How can I contribute most? Those kind of questions.
So we are just about 6:30, but maybe to close, and our last question, which I think is appropriate, is what's the best way to follow up after an interview, but without coming across as too pushy?
So the best way to follow up in an interview would be to write a handwritten thank you card to the person or the people that you interviewed with, if that's appropriate, or the point person that you're working with on the job, and to do it right away afterwards, and then or to do an email right away and summarize maybe some of the key points and why you're really interested. Make the case again why you're interested, why you're a good fit for the job, and that you're looking forward to next steps, and if you can answer any other questions. And then to follow up to see which is maybe the core of your question, to see where they stand where you stand in terms of the selection process. I think give them some. First of all, you might ask one of your questions in the interview. Approximately when do you think I'll be hearing back about the next steps, and something like that. And then if they tell you it's going to be 2 weeks or something, then maybe if you haven't heard back, then reach out to them and say, hey, when we met, you mentioned it might be about 2 weeks, and don't be pushy, and don't say you promised it would be 2 weeks, and then say, I'm just following up to see, where things stand, and I'm very interested. Always use this as an opportunity to say, I'm very interested in the role, and are there, let me know where things stand, and if I can provide any additional information or something like that. I think doing that by email is probably an appropriate thing if you have the person's email, or calling in. But I think email is probably better first rather than calling. And I would just say, if they don't hear back right away, don't panic. Don't send an email the next day. Give it a little bit more time. So I would say gently, you want to sort of be visible and not disappeared, but don't overdo it. So I'd say at reasonable intervals, then reach out to people and say, gee, just checking in, really interested. Let me know. And some people, unfortunately, they will not get back to you, not because you're not a great candidate, or they just may have had a hard decision. They may have been really too busy. What I would say is not so good is to get angry with people if they haven't responded to you within a certain period of time, or they didn't, then sending an angry email afterwards. I don't know that helps in that position, or for future positions when you might approach those people. So with that, one thing I forgot to mention is practice. Interviewing is it's another one of those examples of when you're uncomfortable, you're about to grow, and the way to get more comfortable is to practice more, and to practice with people, some that you're familiar with, but also to do get yourself videotaped when you're interviewed. That's a really fun thing to do, but it actually helps you see what you look like and how you come across, and sees things that you might not see. Videotape, get feedback on that, or just practice with colleagues who can give you good feedback, with mentors. Also with My Health Career Navigator, we have resume review. Then we'd be happy to take a look at your resumes and give you feedback on that. Maybe some of the HCC team would do that. So use your resources. We want you to be successful, and to come across in the way that you really want to come across, to get the job and career that you really want to have. So hopefully this workshop has been helpful to you. We'll look forward to future MyHCN webinars, and we have a lot of webinars already archived that you should check out around job search, around networking, around hot health careers, a number of different kinds of things we've had, and we'll have some additional ones coming up. Give us your feedback about what kind of webinars would be helpful to you, and blogs and those kind of things. And there's a lot of good blogs and things that you can take a look at also. We do review statement of purposes, and this fall we'll have some really good graduate school webinars coming up. So let us know. Promote it to your friends. We'll come talk on your campuses, those kind of things too if you want. So thanks for participating, and we'll see you soon. Good luck.